we have our expert resource person, Mario, who has joined us, and we're going to be discussing value identification, creation, and productization, and that is going to be an exciting conversation. At TICON Africa, we bring together professionals and businesses in the ICT ecosystem across the African continent. We engage our professionals in masterclasses, in webinars, and also our flagship annual conferences. This year, our conference will be in the beautiful city of Livingstone, Zambia, where ICT professionals, marketing professionals, and supply chain professionals will all converge. And we are expecting over 1,000 professionals all meeting there for us to engage. So this is the beginning. You will have a number of master classes, but today, let's focus on identification, creation, and productization. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Mario. Good afternoon, everyone. It's such a pleasure. It's afternoon on my side, but I believe it's morning and evening for some across the continent. Thank you for joining us. I realize that David has already started our session with the welcome remarks. Mario, thank you for joining us. I'm hoping you're having a good day.
Thanks a lot for the introduction there, Lebo. And yes, certainly, and it's already a warm time of day here in, Midrand, Johannesburg, roughly 12 o'clock. And I'm very excited and very privileged to be sharing some of my insights over the last at least 20 odd years in terms of doing product development and business strategy. So thank you very much for this invite. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. Thank you for making the time. But before you start, Mario, I just want to actually do some bit of housekeeping for the participants this afternoon. First, I want to kindly note that we will take questions at the end of the presentation between you and I, Mario, and our participants can throw their comments in the chat and we can have a peek at them once we are done. We will also, secondly, have a video for the Call for Action Awards nomination at the end of our conversation. And that will take about 5 minutes for post this conversation. And any feedback that our participants wish to share, may I request that you look out for a feedback form that will be shared post this event. But to start us off now, Mario, just a thought. Identifying value is one thing. Creating it is a big milestone, but building it into a structured product that generates revenue and impact, that's completely another level. But maybe I could introduce you to our audience as to who you are, what you've done, so that they can relate as you speak as to how you've been identified for this wonderful theme topic that we have today.
Thanks a lot for the opportunity. So really I've come from 20 odd years in the ICT environment, having worked for some of the larger, let's call it, the largest telco in Africa, namely Telkom, and then a very large SI called BCX. I've also have worked previously with Entity Data. And a couple of years ago, I decided, I needed a little bit of a body break from the corporate world and decided to venture out a little bit on my own. So why the particular topic is of great interest to me is exactly that, in terms of, everybody might have a great idea, but it's like, that's the one step. There's the 1,000 steps in between to actually make it, towards the end goal. And there's very much, especially in today's world with AI, with new technology, with new tools, people still need to productize, still need to take opportunities to market, still need to identify, still need to apply the creativity, still need to go through the rigor of product development. And for my own sake, it was a case of, I've always found myself at the intersection of technology, marketing, business, and productization, and hence kind of the particular topic. And just really today's session is about how do you bring all this together, very much a product focus with two very distinct approaches. I'll quickly delve into that in my presentation. But that gives you a bit of a background in terms of my ICT background, in terms of product development and corporate strategy and marketing in a nutshell.
Thank you very much. But I guess that is already setting the tone for us. Maybe redefine that perspective now to our presentation so that we can really understand how our African innovators, they can move from identifying value to building it into a scalable product and even making it a competitive product.
And true to form in terms of what I've just said, around AI. And last night I was like messing around a little bit with Nana Banana and just said, okay, I'm doing a presentation on value identification, creation, productization. Would you like me to do a quick intro screen for me? And, within 5 minutes, out popped out this very nice kind of graphic with, a little bit of the background information, etc. And in a nutshell, what really grasped me about this particular picture is the one truism in anything around identification of value, creation of value, and the productization of value, and that's people. It's done with and for people ultimately. And nowadays you've got to work in a team. You've got to collaborate with one another. You've got to share your information, and that's really what really resonated with this particular picture with me. I did a quick caricature as well, and it seems okay, what do you know about me? And quickly popped out that caricature. So I replaced that with my profile picture. I have given my introduction already, so I'm not going to go through this in major detail, but apart to say that, I've got a little bit of global experiences to add to the information that I presented a little bit earlier. From an ICT perspective, what I've noticed especially over the last 2 to 3 years, is that the definition of value is being absolutely rewritten. A couple of years ago, and when I say a couple of years ago, about 20 odd years ago, we came from a product environment where we sold hardware, we sold software, a couple of value-added services, moved into a project domain, moved into services, managed services, etc. But we right now are in the middle of producing solutions and then innovating with data. So what I'm trying to actually emphasize here is that we've moved from a cloud, let's call it an IT optimization period, to a digital transformation period, which we're still under. Okay, that kind of started roughly about 2016. We've actually definitely moved into a cloud-first, platform-first, secure, borderless security type of environment, where AI and machine learning have a profound impact in terms of the way we actually communicate with one another, the way we collaborate, the way we actually interface with tools. And as my good partner often says, just use a lot of AI tools. I said, no, I do, but I don't actually use AI, but I do have an IA, in other words, an intelligent assistant. So that's kind of the embracing of the new technologies that we need to actually, encompass. In terms of the intelligent assistance that we deal with every single day, and that's going to become, part of our norm. What worked in the past is not going to be good enough for the future, so we need to also look at the new way we actually productize. And part of my presentation is really kind of produces two kind of major themes around productization and value creation. Ultimately, and this is a truism in terms of no matter what kind of business you have, but certainly in the ICT environment, and the purpose of a business is to create a customer. Okay, you can have the best idea in the world, you don't have a customer, that idea literally sits on the shelf. Okay, and the concept of your customer's customer is yours too. Products, services, etc., all designed for the end user in mind. So even though you might have a direct customer, you're actually serving your customer's customer, so to speak. So always kind of produce products and services for them. And the way we've actually done business in the past, we've actually come from a protectionist kind of environment where moats and walls, we've protected our businesses. Those are no longer valid in the AI world. We've got to really look at the way we actually do innovation, the way we actually create value, and technology is that enabler for innovation going forward. And to your point a little bit earlier, Lebo, with regards to, let's call it, trying to actually come up with an idea and then really making it reality. is that understanding value identification can be seen in three lenses. One, you can look at the whole operating environment and understand where you want to play, and then focusing on where you want to win. And the kind of customer intimacy there and the level of, let's call it, problem solving is actually low. You're just looking at trends, look at market sizing, etc. But you haven't really developed a product. But it gives you an idea of where to aim if you are a corporate, for example. If you're a small business person, your intimacy, your customer intimacy is a lot higher. Your level of innovation has to be absolutely sublime. Your level of agility has to be really second to none, so that you understand the mission critical priorities of your end goal, of your end customer, long before perhaps that they do themselves. So it's almost like you've got to have, innovation's got to have, you can kind of have these three kind of lenses: what's happening in the global environment, what products and services you may be wanting to produce, but at the same time really focus in terms of your customer needs. And I'll delve into that in terms of my presentation, in terms of how to actually look at that. So just extrapolating that a little bit, the product world, the services world can really be now kind of be segmented into two parts. Those that offer, and those are manufacturing service providers that offer products, services, and solutions. And those, for example, that are really look at rapid evolution, getting to MVP very quickly and focusing on the customer's mission critical priorities. In other words, what is their problem, what are their goals, and how do we solve them? And what are the benefits associated with that? And ultimately, we are here to solve a business problem. The value construct hasn't changed in 20, 30, 40 years. It's all about how can we do things better, how can we reduce costs, how can we improve revenue streams, what are the benefits we can actually add to our products and services, etc. So that particular construct hasn't fundamentally changed and has actually remained the same. So when I kind of put this presentation together, I quickly clustered around two major, let's call it product development and product innovation type of themes. The one was very much around products and services and offers and solutions, and those kind of, let's call it, they had more of a tried and tested product lifecycle management theme to it. And then obviously anything associated with MVP where agility, Scrum, etc. really comes to the fore in those particular type of solutions. And it's not to say one is better than the other, it's just to say that typically if you're looking at a scaling product, looking at a scaling solutions, you've got to have the rigor, okay, and the kind of the governance around those particular products. However, if you are building products with almost like version enhancements on a weekly basis, MVPs on a weekly basis, for example, obviously that requires a different mindset and shift in terms of what you're going to produce for your customers there, and those are a lot more niche, a lot more focused. So from a product and services and offers solutions point of view, we kind of need to paint, let's call it the value identification canvas. What are the customer insights that you have? What are the vertical insights that you might actually have? What's happening with technology? What are the needs? What are the insights? What are the OEM roadmaps for those particular solutions? And what are the go-to-market insights that you might have? It's one thing to actually launch a cloud-based product in South Africa. There's are nuances in terms of what might happen in Botswana, what might happen in Zambia, East Africa, West Africa, North Africa, for example. So your go-to-market will actually vary, perhaps on a country-by-country basis, but certainly by zone basis. What happens how you go to market in East Africa is going to be a little bit different to how you go to market in West Africa. The benefits that the customers see and the lenses that they see the benefits through are two distinct type of lenses, and those need to be understood when entering those markets. But at the same time, who are your competitors? What are they doing? We live in a red ocean. We're always trying to create blue oceans for ourselves, but it's after a while, it's everybody will caught on to the fact that there's money to be made and you making it, and they also want some. So that becomes a red ocean very quickly, and that leads to in terms of what do you want to do from a corporate point of view in terms of your market sizing, and this is how you sell your business case, etc., into the governance structures. So having said that, and this is quite a full slide, but I just want to give let's call it that swimming picture in terms of the global insights, for example, on Logistics 4.0. It's a piece of work that I actually produced for a particular organization, and really just painting the canvas of what was happening in Logistics 4.0, and the two key drivers that really came out in terms of what was happening in terms of the growth in logistics, okay, and what were the biggest pain points with regards to, for example, last mile inefficiencies. And from there come your products, from there come your solutions, from there come your use cases, from there come all the good things you need to go and solve for companies in operating in certain countries. So having said that, understanding the canvas allows you to look at the use cases, allows you to actually then productize for those particular use cases. And hence, this very broad picture in terms of where possibly to go and start hunting for business. From a corporate point of view, with a lot of governance, when you start building platform-based businesses, everybody needs to really understand and delve in terms of how do you identify the value? What customer insights do you use? What's your competitor analysis? How do you analyze your market? What are the technology trends, etc.? And that's where you identify the value. But how do you realize the value on the other hand is predicated around what is the company's business objectives? What are their goals? The value creation and the value realization must match this company goals and objectives. If they don't, you're actually producing products and services that don't actually match what you're actually trying to achieve from an investment point of view. And then having said that, you need to look at partnering. You need to look at how you actually go to market in terms of your portfolio strategy and your go to market and your product marketing. I've often seen a lot of ICT organizations create an internal product house because that creates that focus, the level of leverage that you got in terms of those particular skills to take products to market. And then finally, in terms of what is your product and solution strategy and how will you actually manage your digital ecosystem partnerships, and how will you actually manage your portfolio, the roadmaps, etc. So it's quite a complex business when you're actually producing for scale, okay? And for scale and for value. So there's a lot of, let's call it, things that need to happen. But to your point, level, in terms of the 1,000 steps that need to happen in terms of getting to that particular outcome, this just gives you a view of and the value around having the rigmarole around product portfolio management and product lifecycle management to actually make these products and services relevant, especially to the shareholders and also to the market. This is quite a thorough slide. It's not necessary to say you need to go and tick all these things off. The point here is that it's quite thorough, and there's a lot that needs to happen in the background to actually make a product, service, or solution a reality. Ultimately, though, in terms of, in a nutshell, when you've actually launched your products, you need to obviously understand who are you selling it to, how will you sell it, where in the ICT value chain will you be selling it to? Will it be a consultative sale, or will it be a buy and sell? Do you produce support and maintenance contracts, etc., for your services? What are you selling? And I've given an example here of a complete ICT stack, whether it be cloud, or be infrastructure services, applications, etc. You've actually got, where in the stack are you actually playing? Are you actually playing in multiple portions of the stack, or are you actually playing in the specific niche portions of the stack? Ultimately, you don't do things alone. Decisions need to be made around, do you develop a product? Do you enhance the product? Do you partner? Do you sunset products? And at the end of the day, you've got to look at the business value associated with that product or solution and look at the time and complexity it takes to actually create those products and solutions. Therefore, and I've discussed partnering a bit later in the presentation. And the point here is really it's about, how do you create value for your shareholders and how do you create value for your clients, for the end clients, and then, is it easy enough to actually go and create that value? So having said that, from a solutions management point of view, you've got to answer a couple of key questions. Again, this is a canvas of let's call it documents perhaps that need to be produced or questions that need to be answered. But ultimately, do you have a product definition? Do you know what you're selling? Does sales know what you're selling? Have you positioned it in the market? Do you have a marketing communications plan? Have you identified the opportunities in the particular market? Do you have the legal contracts in place, the SLAs, the partnerships in place, etc.? And then once you are we've got this go-to-market process, do you have the fulfillment assurance and billing processes in place? Service management, ticket management, integration, technical product definitions. Have the solutions architect been trained? Has the sales enablement taken place? Do you have the lead to cash, for example, processes all in place? And then at the end of the day, like I said, you're not alone in this world. Apart from the incoming partners, you've also got the outgoing partners. What is your channel strategy? How are you going to go take this to market? You're going to go direct, you go through other channel partners, etc. So these are all key questions that need to happen as part of the value, not only identification creation, but this is part of now the value execution in terms of being able to actually produce this market, the services for the market and taking them to market. Ultimately, in a organization, whether it be a BCX, a Telkom, or even a telco anywhere in Africa, you've got to have some form of governance. You've got to apply, the minds of your shareholders to the fact that is there a market for what you're trying to sell? Where's the opportunity? Is there a business case, for example? Is there a program plan? And that gives you an opportunity to actually sell that internally. And then once you actually are able to actually get over that particular hurdle, which is probably the first gate, you actually then go through a product development process. And then you get to a position where you've got, are you ready to actually sell that product? Are you actually to launch that product? You now got to go back internally and, resell it back into the organization, back into your exco, to get their approval to actually proceed into the market. And, it's one thing to be ready for sale. It's another thing to be ready for delivery. If you have fulfillment insurance processes on your place, and not really then for delivery, you might be marketing it, creating, some type of traction, but you got to be prepared to actually be ready for delivery. Ultimately, markets do change. The market drivers are always in constant flux, and then you've got to enhance those particular products. Your supplier base, has got their own particular roadmaps, etc. So you need to see product development as a loop of enhancements, so to speak. And you really just then bring it back into your governance process and before you actually launch them back into the market. All too often I've seen people launch products in different parts of the organization, find they actually are competing products on the same market and the same customer base. This level of governance just allows it, to know what the left hand and the right hand are doing, and gives a certain sense of confidence that, where's the money coming from, what's the potential in terms of upside of revenue, upside of GP, and also what are the costs involved, and how will you actually get to a business case. So turning the coin a little bit on the other side, I've given this very rigorous view of typically how corporate to big organizations develop products, and even they themselves go through an MVP kind of process as well. But if you're a smaller organization, you want to look at specific problems, how will you tackle that from a productization point of view? And again, borrowing from the agile world, borrowing from MVP, let's call it way of doing things, is really very much this side of the coin. And really just borrowing a little bit from this gent in terms of Steve Jobs, who once said, you can't just ask customers what they want and then try and give them. By the time you get it built, they've moved on to something else. You've actually got to then be solving business problems, or a customer problem is ultimately the key here. So again, you've got to be prepared to know your customer, find the goals, find the problems, and how to then get their attention as well. Who are you going to target? What are their business objectives? What problems do they have? How will you solve it? Do you have the right solutions? And it's one thing to have the right solutions. It's another thing, do they actually want? Okay, they might have a problem, but it's not necessarily they'll actually want it at that point in time. Will it be profitable? And will it be feasible? Do you have the technology? Do you have the skills in order to be able to deliver on that particular problem? Or key questions as any entrepreneur will actually know. And having said that, a very famous example is Uber. Okay, really where the problem was, or the goal of that individual was, individuals creating a platform-based business was somebody needed to get to a party. It was a hassle getting a taxi at that time of the night. The solution was, platform-based and hard solution. And again, with a bit of marketing, promotion, etc., getting the communication out there. So it really was about a solution that was communicated, that really solved a fundamental problem for a group of people that didn't just spread. And then what was the goal? It was actually just getting to the party. I mean, Netflix has got a very similar story that we can go to as well at some other stage. Another example, for example, of how to actually look from a customer's perspective is, if you put yourself in the place of a client. For example, in this particular case, I need, but are 3 questions that you need to ask. And then from there, you identify what value you can actually be looking at, and what are the benefits for the customer, and what are the attributes associated with this product that you can actually identify. In this particular case, I'm a small business owner. I need skills training capability for my employees, especially those in sales and marketing. I don't have online skills platforms to meet the expectation of my employees and address immediate business needs. So the real thrust of it is, the solution is a skills platform targeting sales and sales support staff. And the business model was based on a subscription-based model with associated and training certification that was generated internally, for example. So again, looking at the goal, looking at the business outcomes, okay, and at the same time identifying the problem, actually pretty key in terms of that value identification, value realization through the benefits, and communicating the attributes of the solution. Very much from a MVP perspective, I'm borrowing a lot from, say, the Lean Startup. I'm not going to go into this into major detail. It's really about value-based innovation has got an absolute place in terms of identifying the challenges, focusing on the customer needs, and then knowing how to execute. Going through that design thinking process, the Lean Startup process, as well as in the agile way of actually executing and being able to knowing when to pivot, for example, between design thinking, problem and prioritizing what customers actually want, and then going actually develop it, and then going back the whole time in terms of this virtuous loop, in terms of actually just saying, are you still being relevant? What are the enhancements you need to actually produce for your solution? And a very simple example is, again, from just creating from a vision to reality point of view, and always really ask yourself those 3 particular questions that I've got in the checkbox there. Are you still being, is your solution desirable for your customers? Is it feasible? Is it viable for the particular marketplace? Have you understood the problem? Have you gone through a discovery process? Did you screen ideas? Did you design your solution? Did you assess it? And go back again. Continuously ask yourself that problem to ask yourself, are you still be relevant? And can you create those enhancements? And here's a very simple example of, let's call it a home water metering kind of system in terms of trying to find where your leakages are, or alternatively where potentially, where your costs are actually being derived from in terms of your water usage. Every single stage of the design process required an understanding in terms of how do you solve the water meter problem, how do you solve the data communication problem, how do you solve the platform and the server problem, and how do you solve the problem actually feedback in the graphic user interface back into the client. And again, in a nutshell, this is effectively what the proposed solution look like in terms of, what does the solution look like? We've solved it in terms of going through an iterative process, but at the same time, we also identified what are the end goals for the user. And again, the end goal was really, how much water am I using? What are my appliances using? And am I got any water leakage? And can I actually, for want of a better term, really control my water usage? And do I know how and where I'm using my water? Were the key questions for, say, a household. As this is really a project example in this particular case. Communicating that out into the real world really takes a combination of communication tools. Whether or not you've got something on the website, a physical product, something that's de-featured version of the particular product, doesn't really matter. You've got to really get out there, get into sales meetings, get into organizations such as this, and actually promoting yourself. And you alluded to something that was happening in Livingstone in Zambia coming up. That's a fantastic opportunity to get out there and actually just promote your ideas, your concepts, your workable or de-featured type of product. Get a clickable prototype up and going. Create the sales brochures. Create the web. Let's call it the web presence, etc., and then create the Instagram, create the Facebook, and create all those digital presence, points of presence to actually get your idea and prototypes up into the market. Ultimately, from an industry partnering point of view, and this applies whether you're in the corporate world or you're actually doing things a little bit on a smaller scale, you've got to consider whether or not you're going to, go into some form of alliance, some form of partnership. Are you, building for an industry, or are you going to be building something that's a little bit adapted to an industry type of direction? At the end of the day, partnerships form the basis of how you actually improve your benefits, how you improve your visibility in the market, how you adapt to the market needs, create that visibility. And again, are you going to be customer-led or partner-led, or are you going to be industry-led? And you've got to have those good conversations with your partners. And those partners can be fellow coders, for example, in terms of how you actually take these products to market. So industry partnering is an absolutely key and crucial, let's call it, success factor in terms of taking new and really agile products to market. And then finally, just a note of thanks from my side, and just maybe leaving everyone with, in terms of a thought, in terms of embracing, whether you're a corporate or a small business person, you've got to embrace that MVP mindset and let your customers' needs drive your innovation. And with that, I'll say thank you very much, Lebo and the team. Thank you for allowing me to participate on your platform. To me, it's really about advancing the ICT innovation together as a South African, as an African, as a global citizen, and also about empowering the next generation of digital innovators. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mario. That was a mouthful. I believe our audience has a lot of questions. I actually have a few myself that I would love for you to kind of share before we get to our audience questions. I'm actually very curious, Mario, because in ICT in Africa, and I'll speak also from the Botswana ecosystem, ICT tends to fail a lot. We grapple to solve problems and just make them fashionable. And once that hits the market, 24 hours in a year, it's out of fashion, and then we grapple with how to maintain relevance. What is the biggest mistake that our innovators make in trying to maintain and sustain that value, and also the product that they may have felt was lucrative, but are failing to make it?
Well, that's a hard question to answer, because I mean, at the end of the day, MBA 101 is how do you create something that is sustainable and competitive at the same time? In other words, how do you sustain your competitive advantage? The bottom line is, as I indicated, you look at an opportunity, you see a blue ocean, and you create a niche, and you solve a problem. I think in this particular instance, you have got to be in a position to start nailing together a few customers so that you get that revenue stream growing. Okay, because if you don't try and actually get quite a few customers in and start communicating to them and then launch your product. In other words, go through almost like a pre-sales kind of, let's call it, journey versus a launch journey, and then hopefully your sales will come. Rather promote yourself first, get the buy-in, get the contracts in, get the sales in, and then do the proper launch, if that makes sense. So therefore, at least you've got those revenue streams coming in that are stable. Is it easy to then sometimes ideas to be copied? Absolutely. Absolutely. You can be disintermediated quite quickly, but to avoid the, let's call it, losing heart, go through a pre-sales journey first. Okay, get it ready for sale, do your demos, sign up your customers, and then launch. That's probably one avenue of actually looking at it. Otherwise, you might, like you say, be disintermediated by third parties.
It's quite an agile strategy that you're speaking about, which many of us, I guess, if we don't develop ourselves and grow with the market, will definitely fail if we try to maintain a certain status quo without growing with the technologies as they advance. But I would not be doing myself justice, Mario, if I don't ask you, because TICON Africa is a big umbrella and a beautiful one as well for the various associations in the continent. We need those collaborations. You also mentioned those collaborations, and you mentioned skills set that can be exchanged between our countries and regions as well. Can you maybe just share a little more on how these associations, either through TICON Africa or the partnerships between the associations, to build synergies? Yours is digital synergy. help us synergize our associations?
No, 100%. You've got to look at value from a value chain point of view, if that makes sense. If you only look at value from one part of the value chain and don't understand the interlink between the different players, you will tend to be a bit myopic in terms of one's approach. Okay, it's not criticism; it's fact that I use even for myself in terms of you've got to network, you've got to build relationships with, let's call it some of the global drivers. I mean, you've got presence in Africa in terms of whether it be, whether it be American companies, European companies, Asian companies, etc. You've got to invite them into your space with regards to doing specific partnerships, but not partnerships in terms of, you've got to have equitable partnerships, if that makes sense, where everyone is actually, creates a win-win kind of situation. Secondly, you've got to also, and I did some work as a proposal for a digital innovation hub down in KZN, where you've got to have that public-private kind of partnerships come in. It's one thing to say, here's an innovation hub. It's another thing to say, do you know about us? Okay, would you actually be wanting to invest not only in software, hardware, bricks and mortar, etc., but would you want to invest in terms of skills development, for example, and bring the corporate partnerships into your journey as well? Okay, it's one thing to have, for example, do a networking event in Africa for this particular organization, but you've got to bring your upstream and your downstream partners to the event as well. The people that actually help you create the technology, okay, and help you create the solutions, but also the people that are actually going to consume the solutions, and give them a view of not only the challenges, but also give them a view of how those challenges are being overcome. What are those solutions? And you'll be quite surprised in terms of going back to the example in terms of the Steve Jobs picture I had a bit earlier on, is that some customers will actually start saying, I've actually had that problem. I didn't know I actually had it. Okay, maybe actually we should talk further because you've just crystallized something in me. I know I've got the problem. Thanks for giving me the solution, without me having to look for it. So you've got to kind of position yourself in the middle with your, let's call it your upstream partners and with your downstream partners, and create that synergy between all three of you.
Wonderful. I'm hoping you are aware that we're having the TICON Africa conference in September, and hopefully this conversation will be part of the conversations at the conference in Zambia, that we can try and create value between our associations and those collaborations as well. Before we close, thank you everyone, and thank you, Mario, for your input. I really appreciated that value identification and validation and productization is actually for us as we grow, and making sure that we sustain and maintain it as technology grows. You had lovely canvases there, which I believe hopefully you can share with us so that we can also take home, not just documenting them, but to translate them into something that is that can be implemented. With one sentence, Mario, before we close, what does a successful African product look like in 10 years from now?
That's a great question. Anything that really just enhances our well-being as people, okay, in terms of how we communicate with one another and how we do good for one another. I think it's probably a goal for me personally. So it's not one particular thing, but ultimately, though, I'm looking at the next generation of folks that are coming through, the youth that's coming through, and anything that really inspires and gives hope and allows them to continuously be part of that innovation cycle, I think, and creates that inspiration within themselves, within their communities. I think those are great products and services to have.
Thank you. So I believe Africa does not need new ideas or more ideas. We just need to structure value identification and disciplined product creation, professional productization, and even more cross-border collaboration. And if we get it right,
Absolutely.
we don't just build startups, but we build an African market leaders. Thank you, Mario. With
Thanks
that,
very much.
I would like to thank the audience and Mario once again. And with a lot of points from Mario, please feel free to share comments and feedback on the form that will be shared with you. We also have more webinars coming in the year, and we're looking forward to your call for nominations that are open, as David had mentioned earlier. Kindly give us 5 more minutes of your time at the end of the session to watch the video on the call for nominations for TICON Africa Conference 2026. With that, this is not goodbye. We'll definitely see you soon. Have a good day.
I hope that the award will inspire everyone to be faithful to African technology.
This is the best, greatest conference in the world. Tonight is obviously about recognizing talent.